We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I'm the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am super excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Kenrese Carter. She is the VP of People and Culture at Genexa. Kenrese, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Wow, that's a mouthful. Thank you, Christina, for inviting me on your show. Well, first of all, a little bit about myself. As you can hear, I am from Jamaica. I always like to start with that. And I want to say that growing up, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So my background actually started in technology. A lot of people don't know, but I used to work in databases, writing codes and all that good stuff. And I had an epiphany somewhere around, I want to say 6-7 years into my career, which kind of charted me into product development. And during my time working in product development, I worked in 2 telecoms firms, back in the day, and I was able to travel over 30 something markets. And during my travels, I just developed this incredible love for the space of health and wellness and people. And I decided that I was going to reshape my career, hence who I am today. But we'll talk a little bit about that later. In terms of what I wanted to be when I grew up, I always wanted to be a dancer and a singer. And I want to tell you this fun fact. I actually went to music school and dance school while I was a senior product manager working for one of those telecoms firms. So I did fulfill that dream. But of course, my dad said, no, I want you to go in that direction. I don't know. I don't know if I'd have been that incredible singer, but certainly I felt like I was an incredible dancer.
I absolutely love that. I love the creative answers as well. You shared a little bit about your kind of personal journey to this work, but I always like to ask, what defines you as a person, Kenrese?
Wow. I think that anybody who knows me is going to tell you, oh my gosh, she's so spiritual. I think that if I had to define myself, it's such a difficult question, but if I had to define myself, I would say anything to do with well-being. I'm always seeking out, how can I be better? Even though everyone ages, I'm just like, how can I reverse that? I think what defines me is just being that person who shows up fully authentic in all that I do, being bold and being fierce. I think that's me in a nutshell.
I love it. Being bold, being fierce, and authenticity is something that, a lot of folks are trying to really intentionally cultivate, which I think is important. I'm sure there are many different projects that you're working on a given day. What would you say is the next problem you're currently trying to solve?
I want to say, my boss always says there are no problems, there are only solutions. That's our internal joke. For Genexa, and I want to point this to work because I joined Genexa's team about I want to say a year and 3 months ago, to be exact. And my goal was to build out the entire framework, the people strategic framework around the business. And I'm still in the trenches of that. I want to say we've made tremendous strides. In fact, I was just in a meeting yesterday going over what we were able to accomplish in the last year, and it's just been phenomenal. And I think the next focus for me is just developing the people, right? And I have a passion for women. So men, don't feel badly, but I also want to develop more female leaders. I want to empower them, for them to understand that they can be all that they're desiring to be as well. There's no limits, So that's one of my next big things.
Well, plus one to that. I love developing people, and also female leadership is really important too. In terms of Genexa, I know something that is really important to the mission-driven organization is clean medicine. Can you define clean medicine for our listeners if they aren't familiar, and why it's important to Genexa?
Okay, so first of all, let me say that if you have not seen our products, you definitely need to go and check our website out. Shameless plug, it's genexa.com, where you're going to see a plethora of clean medicines at your fingertips. So basically what clean medicine is, it's very simple, right? It's the same active ingredients that you're used to in all your traditional products, except that what we have done is that we have now removed those artificial fillers and no artificial dyes, and of course, no common allergens.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much clean medicine in a nutshell.
Thank you. I think that was definitely easy to understand for me, as well as just like continuing to learn about the space. In terms of your internal folks who are working on the mission of the organization day in and day out, from your kind of role as the shepherd of, VP of People and Culture, what are qualitative and quantitative ways you measure kind of that company culture?
Well, I want to start by defining company culture because I think a lot of times when we talk about company culture, it has so many different meanings, right? And I
Mhm.
want to say that it's usually centered around the ethos of the organization. It's the way people feel about the work they do. It's the values they believe in. It's where they see the company going, and it's what it's what they're doing on a daily basis, right? And that's on a collective space. Now, the reason why I'm defining that, Christina, is because if you think about it, right? Now, when you throw the word qualitative and quantitative, then it becomes a bigger monster, right? Because
Right.
imagine quantifying the way somebody feels, determining how somebody feels and all of that good stuff. It's really difficult, right? There are ways, though. There are ways. So, from a qualitative space, I would say that we use things like surveys, right? Temperature checks, different responses to get a sense of, how are people really feeling. And, this may not be textbook, but really paying attention and observing your workforce from a qualitative perspective, right? The
Mhm.
comments that they're making, when they give you feedback, are you really listening? One of the biggest places to do that as well is exit interviews, believe it or not, because I mean, obviously you don't want to wait until your exit, but there's also a place for that as well. I want to say also from a quantitative perspective, and of course, we're talking about numbers now, right? Once you say quantitative, there's a number to that. I would say looking at your attrition rate, right? What's your turnover rate? What's the frequency of people leaving the organization? And one that the traditional person may not pay attention to is your referral rate. That's also a number, right? So you can look at how are people really feeling? Are they recommending our organization? Are they referring people to us? And at what rate is that, right? And doing that, because what you find is that when it comes to culture and being able to measure that, it's such a tricky space, especially when you go into a company that the culture was set and then you're now trying to change that, right? So,
Mhm.
for example, if you're coming from a more formal structure and then you're looking to now bring in something more informal or vice versa, that can also cause what you call a culture clash. And I get so excited when we talk about culture because it's such a huge part of the success of any organization.
Absolutely. It's a huge part of the success of the organization because people are, they are the ones working on the products and services, and they are the ones kind of hearing from the customers as well. And from your point as well, there's not just one way to really kind of get that feedback and kind of measure company culture. It's a living, breathing kind of workplace, whether it's virtual or remote. So you have to keep a pulse on what's happening. And again, that active listening piece. So not just asking how people are feeling or if they feel like they belong at the company. I read in kind of Genexa's info that, we also strive to put people over everything, which I love. Can you give some examples for our listeners who are also trying to have that people first mentality of how this manifests in different kind of areas of the business?
Oh my goodness, this is such a powerful one. And I have to give a shout out to our CEO for this because, he was adamant that we have to be a people first business. And I mean, if you think about what we're doing, we're revolutioning the way we do medicine, right? Revolutionizing, sorry, the way we do medicine.
Yeah.
And just based on that tells you that the ethos of our company, right? For people over everything, we start by even just the people that we do business with. How do we conduct ourselves in business? Are we looking at minority businesses? Are we really having some kind of philosophy that governs the way we act when we interact with other people? Are we accessible? So let's talk about, if you should look at our packaging, on the side of our packaging, we have numbers, like actual numbers that you can contact people in our company. There's no long waiting lines. There's no, sometimes when you call people's customer service, there's no response. We actually take the time out to respond to every single customer and non-customer if they have a question, right? So these are some of the ways we're putting people first in our hiring processes, which I personally ensure, we don't do the ghosting of people. So
Yes.
even if you don't make it past a certain level, I promise you, you're going to get some feedback from us at Genexa. In fact, I remember the first time I did that with somebody, they were blown away. They said, this was the first they were doing an interview, and somebody actually took the time out to give them feedback. I don't know if you saw, Christina, something trending recently where a recruiter was bragging about not giving more to a person that had applied, right? And that she could have given more. And it was just very contrary. At
Yeah.
Genexa, we believe in fair pay. We believe in equity. So if you come in, let's say I interviewed you for a role, and for whatever reason, what you've asked is less than the band of what we've set forth, we're not going to pay you less. We're going to pay you what is fair. Well, and those are some of the ways that we're putting people over everything. Internally, we listen to our people. We implement feedback. So for example, last year, and I'm happy to announce that we have a 98% favorability score in Genexa in terms of engagement. That's incredible. We use an external agency. So, of course, we want to make sure that everything we do is above board. And one of the things that we did is we had an open-ended question section, and we took some of those things and we did it in kind of like a town hall style to say, hey, we hear you. Here are some of the ways that we're going to address these things. No, don't get me wrong. We're not perfect, right? So we can't do everything all at once, but it's a way to ensure that our people stay engaged and that they're really feeling that we are putting the people before everything else. And I want to tell you this, Christina, it's the smallest trick to impact your bottom line. A lot of people don't realize it, but if you're putting people first and they truly see that you're valuing them, how you show up in society, they're going to want to do business with you. People are going to come back and work for you. They're going to want to refer you to other people. So I think that's, I can't tell you that there are many other ways we're doing it, but I think that, these are some of the key things that we're doing. We're very people-centric.
I like the different examples because it touches on how you're working externally with vendors, with potential employees and current candidates as well, and then internally with current employees and team members to make sure they are heard, listened to, and seen. I know you shared some kind of metrics in terms of company culture, and that active listening piece is so important. There's so many conversations around today's talent market, around folks really reflecting on what they want to spend 40 plus hours a week working on. And in your experience, what are really key ingredients to employee retention, knowing that employees are at different stages of their careers and just life in general too?
Oh my goodness. When this question for me is like a gem of all gems. When people talk about retention, you have to look at the other side of it, which is engagement, right? If you're engaging your people, right? And if your culture is solid, and I mean, obviously there are different types of culture, you are going to retain your people. I want to say the first thing I do in Genexa is that we listen. And I know it's a simple thing, but believe it or not, a lot of us miss the mark when it comes to retaining people because we don't listen. So we start our retention mission from our hiring process. In fact, from our recruitment, right? The way we show up externally, again, piggybacking off of our people over everything ethos, to when they come in to have a conversation with us. That experience, when you talk about customer experience, we talk about that people experience. So we start from the beginning, right? So once we start talking to you, you're going to see the difference in how we show up. So we start retaining you before you even get into our organization, right? We work on building engagement programs. So when you get in, one of the key things we do in Genexa is day one, we have what we call our, I'm trying to find the correct terminology, but basically it's a team dynamics, right? It's a team dynamics meeting on day one of your journey in the organization. And we talk about, and I don't know if you've ever done that whole thing about team dynamics, the forming, the storming, the norming, and performing. And we work with the team, both the manager and the respective new employee, and we go through some of the challenges along the way that they may face and how they mitigate. We start that right off the bat, right? So imagine you're going into an organization and already they're saying to you, hey, we know there are difficulties that are going to come up, but here's how we're going to mitigate. We also do a lot of assessment. So we assess the personality types and we ensure that we pair with the right leaders. And I know this is retention being done in a different way, but if you think about it, right? If you are hiring somebody or somebody comes into your organization and you are not basically pairing the right leader with that new employee, it's a recipe for disaster, okay? We also make sure that we get recognition and rewards right. Yeah. Recognition and rewards is so important. So in Genexa, we have team recognition, but we also have the individual. And believe me, it doesn't have to cost $1 million. I know there are tons of systems out there. We're actually doing one of the word bracelets. I don't know if you're familiar with them. And what we're doing is we're coining some really nice words, and each month an employee gets that. So it's like a coveted bracelet. If you see somebody wearing that, hey, that person did a great job. And then for the team, we do outings to kind of bring that cohesiveness, in-house. In terms of, I mentioned the exceptional onboarding experience, but I just want to touch on, not only do we focus on retention on day one, but we have our onboarding experience, which is different from, your initial orientation period. of that stretches or spans over 90 days. So we do that 30, 60, and 90-day check-in. And this gives us an opportunity. We do it both with the manager and the employee, but we also have separate conversations to give that employee an opportunity to give feedback. And I can tell you this, Christina, this has been one of the most important things to retain. In fact, so much so that employees will come to me and they say, Kenrese, this is so phenomenal. I've never had this, right? So throughout their journey, they're not lost. They're just not a number. I know for bigger organizations, it can be difficult, but as a growth company, we have that opportunity. We're going to capitalize on it, right? I would also say another strategy is offering winning incentives. So don't just give incentives for incentives' sake. Look at what your employees are asking for and see how you can bridge the gap there. And of course, you're managing to retain. Develop your leadership, develop your management skills. All of us are evolving beings and we're growing. And, things we said in the past, we can't say no. Things we did in the past, we can't do now, right? So you want to make sure that you're focusing on those elements of retention.
I love that. I think that's so important. And in a lot of your examples, creating that meaningful connection, being intentional with especially managers in terms of resourcing, training, and also empowering teams to do their best work. And there's a ton of research out there that shows if you feel connected to your team, your manager, the work that you're doing, then your output is a lot better, you're happier, and it's a win-win for everybody involved. And we also know that, when you really care about the work you're doing, it might be a little bit easier to feel burned out too. And I want to ask from your perspective, what are proactive ways that really managers can set the standard and prevent burnout?
Well, I'm going to give this is like I definitely have to give a shameless plug here. I mean, if you want to prevent burnout, well, certainly you need to go and check out Genexa.com, where we do have our sleepology, which I'm going to touch on a little bit. That's our sleep tablets. And we also have something for stress, right? So I'd always say have that in your arsenal. And, I'm saying it in jest, but to be honest, it is true. That's a part of my own personal arsenal. But on a different note, in terms of preventing burnout, I'm going to say that it's so important to ask for help. That's the first thing. If you're not asking for help as a leader, you're not doing something right, because nobody has it all together, right? Before anything that I'm going to do, I lean on my team members. If you are burnt out, it's because you're trying to do everything by yourself, and it's humanly impossible to do so. I would also say that one of the methodologies we use in Genexa from a more strategic management perspective is what we call our quarterly review system. So we manage performance in a very strategic manner. So we start our planning the first, like say mid-June onwards for the next year, right? And we plan ahead. And once we have our corporate goals, we break those goals down into SMART objectives for every employee, right? And when we break down those objectives, what we do is then we ensure that those are being tracked on a quarterly cadence. So we're not killing ourselves to get to the end of the year. You're chunking it so it gives you a better opportunity to meet those goals. And I know it's probably not the traditional answer that somebody would expect, but a lot of times the reason why we're burnt out is because we have too many side projects going on. We're not very strategic. We don't know how to say no. And we take too much on all at once, right? Because in an organization, people are going to dream up ideas, right? And we tend to use that parking lot ideology where we say, put it in the parking lot if it's not going to get us to that bigger objective. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In terms of taking real vacations, right? So sleep is another one. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit from the organization now to the individual. And I want to say that sleep is so important. I see it all the time. People, they get up from super early, they go to bed super late, and there's no point of rejuvenation. If you're a leader and you're not getting sleep, then that's a recipe for disaster. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I see that people don't do very well is take real vacations, because there's this expectation that because you're leading the charge, you must always be plugged in. And that's not possible, right? It's so important to get that unplugged at intervals. For me personally, I never miss an exercise workout, no time at all. Like,
Love it.
I don't miss it, right? So I hope the guns are showing there. I don't miss my workouts. I make sure that I'm eating. And to be honest, remember, I'm a clinical nutritionist as well as an HR practitioner, and I've studied a lot of integrative methodologies. So I know the importance of eating the right diet for your mind, your body, and just your overall well-being, right? And so I would say those are some of the key things that I would definitely push to say, hey, if you really want to avoid that burnout, make sure you're doing some of these on a regular cadence.
I like how you broke that out into kind of the organization, what resources can be provided, what kind of conversations, asking for help, really, really important. And then for the individual too, taking care of yourself, that sleep. I had a great night of sleep the other night and wow, it transformed me. So I'm definitely prioritizing that personally too. And I think one of the major changes over the past 2 years is people are more apt, or perhaps in a lot of places, not everywhere, it's less stigmatized to talk about burnout and the things that are going on kind of outside of work, to additional responsibilities and roles you play kind of in your life. And we've seen things like more flexible work schedules and really mental health resources, benefits, 4-day work week, kind of taking company-wide days off too to reset. I want to ask, what innovation in the people space are you most excited to see, and why?
Oh my goodness. You know, I'm going to go to the 4-day work week, right? Because I read a book many years ago and I can't remember now, but the 4-day work week for me that's it. Because let's think about it. If the entire world, and I know this is a bit lofty, but bear with me for a second here, follow the craziness. But if everybody agrees that we can always make money, because we're working, a lot of us, you know, that's a part of it, right? We have to feed our families.
Yes.
We can all agree that 4 days is that sweet spot and even 4 days, maybe 4.5 days, you know, like, but definitely the 4-day work week. I mean, in terms of, I lived in Europe, by the way, for a long time. I recently moved back from Germany. And, you know, when I compare the cadence of how we operate in the US compared to the Caribbean, where I'm originally from Jamaica, it's so much in the US, it's such a high pace, right? So imagine if we were able to work for 4 days of the week, give it our all, and then have 3 days to spend with our families. I mean, in Scotland, it's happening in Spain, it's happening in Japan. Companies like Unilever, I believe, is testing it from what I read. It's happening in the United Arab Emirates and Belgium. I mean, I love Belgium, by the way. I would love to see the 4-day work week for sure.
I love that. I would love to see that too. I think that is more balanced approach as well. What advice would you say for companies who are really trying to incorporate meaningful wellness into their benefits or general people strategy that's really impactful for their team?
Oh my goodness. So this is how I got into HR, by the way. I was actually doing wellness and I decided to merge my, you know, my business knowledge with all of that. And that's how I kind of started out. So one of the things that I used to do was going to companies and consult for them to look at, you know, how are your people showing up? What is it that they need? One of the biggest mistakes that I see companies make is they hire, and it's not a ding on hiring big firms, but they hire these big firms and they put what I call a check the box system in place, but they're not really looking to assess their workforce. The data is there, right? So you know your utilization rate on your benefits. I mean, obviously you don't want to dig into people's personal business because of HIPAA, but you kind of get a sense of what people need, right? You can actually get the data on that. Do we have hypertension? Visibly, you can see if people are overweight, right? And I would say that what you want to first do is assess what the needs are of your organization. And if you want to take a generic approach, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can actually look at the mental space versus the physical space, right? And other elements, because wellness have 9 dimensions, right? So it's a lot of different things. You have financial wellness. Most people, when they talk about wellness, they're probably not going into the depth of what I'm saying. However, I believe that you should start assessing where your people are at if you really want to do it right, and hire a consultant who can really come in and help you to do that, right? I would also make time to incorporate that in your strategy from day one. We did that at Genexa. So right now in our company, we offer healthy lunches, tasty healthy lunches, because people think healthy means the food is not good, right?
Yeah.
And that's so not true. That's so not true. We offer definitely healthy lunches. We also do fitness days where we say, hey, come on. And on those days, like recently we did one of our fitness days. We do that on a themed basis where you get to wear your fitness gears and then maybe wear your favorite tracksuit. So you're building in that engagement, but you're also doing something that everybody can partake in, right? And when you do things like that, by the way, make sure that you open it to everyone, because you have to think about accessibility. Are there any injuries? all of that stuff. Don't bring in somebody that is going to do things that everybody can't participate in. We also offer things like, meditation, being still, but we also do our dance breaks, right? In Genexa, I'm telling you, it's a fun place to be. We do dance breaks. Our CEO will come out and turn the music up, and because guess what? We know we spend a lot of time at work. So why not just do it the right way, right? The thing I notice is that people are going to be fully present if you do this the right way. And like I mentioned at the top of our conversation, Christina, this also impacts the bottom line. People are, there's a saying in Jamaica, we say penny wise and pound foolish, which means that, you're trying to save that penny, but then you're spending, more money on the back end.
Right.
If you spend time to really say, okay, how do I ensure that when my employee shows up, they're fully present, which means that you're not going to have presenteeism, or you're not going to have the opposite of absenteeism where they're constantly out of the office because they're not doing well. So even with our snacks, right, we provide healthy snacks. We encourage our employees to eat healthy. No, we're not going to force anybody, but we live by what we teach, and then everybody comes on board because now it's a ripple effect.
Absolutely. It is a ripple effect. And also it is better for your people, it's better for yourself, and it's better for the business. So again, it's really important to ask people what they need, test things. If it doesn't work, test something else. You're never tied to kind of one decision there, and really making things custom at scale is important. What would you say is a must-have that people leaders need to incorporate in their strategy to be successful in the future? Of course, knowing what we know now, not having a crystal ball of what the future holds, but what's necessary for those folks to succeed.
Ironically, it's the things that most of us take for granted. It's the compassion. If you're going to be a powerful people leader, I believe that you must have compassion, and genuine compassion. You must have a heart of service. I consider myself two types of leader: a transformational and a service leader, which means a servant leader, which means that you are not just doing something for doing its sake, but you're also being a part of the community. You're leading by example. You must be highly emotionally intelligent. If you lack emotional intelligence, this is something you can actually develop. It's not easy, but high emotional intelligence is important in your strategy. And I could give you several examples, right? You may have an employee that's not performing well, and your policy says, if the person gets below a certain number, they're through the door. A highly emotional, but that person was performing good before, right? A highly emotional, intelligent person, a person who is compassionate, will say, hold up a second. Let's see what went wrong with John Brown, why he has now shifted, or why she has shifted to this particular behavior, right? And that's going to make a very big difference in your strategy, because one, that's going to decrease your turnover, right? You don't want to have your organization becoming a revolving door. I have actually consulted for many organizations over, a period of time, over a 10-year period when I had my private practice. And that was one of the things that I saw, where a lot of leaders were quick to discard people rather than understand how do they really, frame that and get the person back on track. That is a must-have in any people leader, right? If you're somebody that doesn't spend time to really understand what makes people tick, everybody's not going to be the same. So you must understand different personality types and how do you interact and engage with those persons. I think the last thing, and I want to really emphasize this piece because it's the buzzword now, the DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a people leader, you must have a diverse mindset, right? And the thing that I'm seeing most here is that, diversity is now easy to check the box to say, hey, I have a person of color, or I have this person, but how do you focus on equity? Right. So for example, some organizations might have, and I'm glad this is not the case at Genexa because I'm leading people, right?
Right.
But you have the diverse workforce, but when you look at where the minorities are, they're on the lower tier of your organization. They're not in your boardroom. And then there's that, there's no inclusion, right? And I think Verna Myers, I think her name is, from Netflix, one of the people that I like to follow on LinkedIn. She gave a really powerful example about, diversity. Of course, we know what that is. Equity, we understand that, but, inviting somebody to that party is the inclusion, right? And then having them and asking them to dance is the inclusion. So you can invite them to the party, but you want to make sure you invite them to dance. That's the inclusive piece that we often miss, right? I believe that any people leader, if you don't have that diverse mindset and really hone in on DE&I, you're going to be missing out and your organization is going to fail, and it's going to fail fast. Why? Because we're if COVID has taught us anything, we're now recognizing that the world is a stage, it's wide open. People are smarter than they were before because information is at our fingertips, and we're now able to see companies that are not practicing that versus companies that are. And shamelessly, Christina, I want to say that in Genexa, our people, our metrics, we're actually at a 54% minority. I mean, we are in Atlanta, and we wanted to ensure that we have a balance there. We're not trying to tip the scales either way, but we want to have that balance. And I think, that's a good measure to show that we are all about having different people from different ethnicities, backgrounds, age groups, etc.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with you that compassion, empathy, emotional intelligence, which you can intentionally learn and practice on your team, understanding that everybody is bringing different experiences, different backgrounds to your team. And it's really important, and it's your responsibility as a leader to bring in that equity-driven mindset and all of your processes, how you engage with folks, because you're engaging with them on a daily basis, and you want to be a leader. And I think that's a great kind of stat from your team to share too. It is February 2022, and in the United States, it is Black History Month. So I want to ask how Genexa is honoring and celebrating Black History Month this year. Also recognized in the UK, I think Black History Month is in October, and we shouldn't only be empowering Black employees or talking about this during February, but I definitely wanted to ask you.
I'm glad you put that caveat, because I think you read my mind there and you knew exactly where I was going, because I was going to say we celebrate, our people of color all year round, and of course all our employees, but specifically because we were talking about Black History Month. I want to say that we kicked off our Black History Month by just doing like a showcase of we're doing our theme this year is Black Excellence. And we're not just doing the traditionals, not that we don't love our Dr. King and all these wonderful people, but we're going for those unsung heroes or heroines, right? And I'm shamelessly, of course, I'm going to throw a couple out there from Jamaica. So this week we're talking about Marcus Garvey, who was a prolific leader. We're also talking about Bob Marley, because he, in terms of his musical prowess, and we're also going to be looking at inventions that nobody knows is from, people of color, Black people, but certainly, and, we say celebrate Black History Month, but we're celebrating the people more than anything else. So it's not just the month, but the people that actually made it, that we have to actually showcase that month. So we're excited about that.
I love that. I love the theme and the folks that you are talking about as well. It's really important to highlight people that, we read about in history books, and also people who, we did not read about, and it's important to learn their stories as well. Kenrese, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to share, or 1 to 2 key insights you hope listeners kind of bring with them after hearing our conversation today?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody that has tuned in. And I hope after this conversation, you're more empowered to look at your people skills, where are you falling short with your people, where are you failing, and also highlighting, what you're doing well, and take away some of these gems. I do want to say that at Genexa, we are always open to feedback. And we encourage people to receive feedback as well. So those are some of the things that I want people to know. I also want to say that as people leaders, take some time out to not only care about others, but yourself. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. If I had anything to say to somebody out there is, how have you been showing up for yourself? We often focus on others, and we are reimagining culture, and we're doing all these incredible things, but truly we're not giving back to self, and you cannot pour from an empty vessel. Yes. I want to challenge you today, right, for all those folks out there who are listening, to just spend some time with yourself, and determine, where do you fall short? What do you need to fill your cup up again?
I love that. I definitely believe in you cannot pour from an empty cup. And I think that goes back to your point earlier of being able to ask for help, being able to really say, I need that full 8 to 10 hours of sleep, and making sure you are taking care of what you need, because you need to empower others as well, no matter where you are in the organization or in life. Kenrese, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
It has been a pleasure.
And as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in the employee feedback management as a requirement for the organization to succeed overall. Have a good rest of your afternoon, everyone.